today I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus.
People are very upset about this. Some of them. New York Times, one of them, criticized for pandemic response. Trump tries shifting blame to the World Health Organization. Why is it shifting blame to say there should be a review because of what we already know to be true? I mean, maybe they deserve some blame. The shifting of blame comment is meant to make you think that the World Health Organization did nothing wrong. The WHO is supposed to be our line of defense here. You know, imagine for a second that, you know, the U.S. Coast Guard is trying to prevent drug runners from getting to Florida, and we find out that that there were, 8 oil tanker-sized shipments of drugs that in broad daylight just happened to roll right up to Miami, and nobody saw a thing, and hundreds of tons of opiates are now all across the country. People would say, maybe we got to look at what the Coast Guard's doing. And I'm not trying to offend the Coast Guard, but you know what I mean? Any organization that has a mission set needs to be held accountable for the mission set. And I just feel like a lot of the military that listen to this are just like, yeah, Coast Guard. They're making all kinds of Coast Guard jokes right now. Show love for the Coast Guard, darn it. But no, really, this is a moment where we either have an understanding of cause and effect. We either believe in accountability for a major organization that's getting billions of dollars of funding like this, that won't let Taiwan in, I would note. Won't let Taiwan. Taiwan is an independent country. It is not a part of China. And just because China is fixated on Taiwan as a part of China does not make it so. But the World Health Organization blocks Taiwan from entry. Isn't that interesting? That's why you've also had WHO employees in some of these interviews refuse to refer to Taiwan. They'll just refer to China, like little programmed cyborgs. Oh, you mean China? Yes, China is doing this thing. No. We're talking about Taiwan, a democratic country that is not a part of. This is going to get very tense going forward. I keep talking about the Cold War with China. One of the ways it's going to heat up is we're just going to start saying, all right, China, you want to play rough? Guess what? We're gonna make sure Taiwan is never gonna be a part of mainland China. Oh, the Chinese Communist Party is gonna freak out about that, because remember, it goes to the origin myth of the Chinese Communist Party that they were a popular people's response and not a bunch of butchers running around with force shooting people that didn't agree with them, and there wasn't an alternative to this, which, as we know, was a government that fled to Taiwan, which is part of why the Chinese Communist Party has this ingrained hatred of Taiwan as a separatist state. This is really the ultimate irredentism. That's what China has for Taiwan. So it's something that, the Trump administration has decided enough is enough. They've seen what it means for the World Health Organization to do China's bidding. We're all suffering now because of this. We're going to find out soon. I believe, this is an assessment, this is not a fact, I believe we'll find out soon that it came from one of the virology institute labs, whatever they're called, in Wuhan, and that it was an accident, but that they were recklessly studying very dangerous viruses in facilities that were just not really equipped for it. I think that's what we're going to find out happened. Maybe it'll just be, bat soup or whatever, but I doubt it. And there's real blame to go around here. But notice how our own media is willing to parrot the talking points of China and, of course, to take the side of Dr. Tedros here, who, as we know, was advocating for Mugabe as a goodwill ambassador. I mean, I'm sorry, was Satan himself unavailable for your goodwill needs? I just want to know. You couldn't get Ted Kaczynski to be your goodwill ambassador. You could think about this. This is who you're gonna put Mugabe forward as a Tedros' idea. Big proponent of it. Yeah, let's get that murderous dictator psychopath to represent the World Health Organization and the UN on the world stage. I mean, my friends, see, part of the problem here is that we all have to, this is just ingrained in the whole UN structure. And look, there's the UN Security Council. There is some disparity, and there should be, among the powers that are, and the real decision-making of that body. But let's also remember the UN really has no authority, does not prevent conflicts, does not successfully intervene. If you want to know how good the UN is at its job, and remember, the World Health Organization is a part of the UN, all you have to do is just go look at the Rwandan genocide and what the UN decided to do there. The UN basically was like, oh, wow, this is going to get really horrific, and there's going to be mass murder on an unprecedented scale in terms of the speed. The speed of murder in the Rwandan genocide was like nothing else we had seen. And UN pulled out. UN's like, whoa, that's going to get really bad. We don't want to be anywhere near that. And God bless some of the peacekeepers and some of the folks who stayed behind and saved lives. But UN was saying, nope, sorry. Because the part of the problem here is that they treat countries as though they're all sovereigns are pushing for the same basic things and operating from the same essential place of decency and morality. That's just a lie. It's just a lie. The Venezuelan government is a bunch of dictator thugs. They are not good people. No one even seems to care that Maduro now has effectively a bounty on his head as a narco trafficker. I think that's how crazy the world has gotten. No one even notices that. Think about that. There's going to be, if someone takes him down, what a movie. You put together a team of mercenaries somewhere and you capture Maduro and bring him in, you get $10 million, $20 million, whatever. I don't know what the bounty is, but it's big. There's a movie there, my friends, that's for sure. But back to the World Health Organization, I just think that, there are going to be people who pretend to care so much about the WHO's work, but in reality, their issue is just that they don't want any blame to be diffused away from Donald Trump. That's their main issue. And Secretary of State Pompeo, who, look, I don't mean to, who's my favorite member of the Trump administration cabinet? Pompeo is great. Pompeo is like my number, for the X-Men. Growing up as a kid, I was always a Wolverine guy, but Gambit was actually my number 2. I was a big Gambit fan. Did you like, Producer Mark, did you know comics? Were you a comics guy?
Occasionally. I like the movies more than I like the comics.
Yeah. So I was a Gambit guy. He was my number 2, and Wolverine was my number 1 for the X-Men. Right? Obviously. Who like Cyclops is like a hall monitor. Don't even get me started. You can't even see the guy's face. So Pompeo is my number 2 in the cabinet if I have to pick, and Barr is still number 1 for me, as you know. I'm not trying to fanboy over Attorney General Barr, but the guy probably saved the Trump presidency, and he slaps around libs like there's no tomorrow. But here's Pompeo talking about the World Health Organization. Play it.
And this is what the president was talking about today. We need to know answers to these things. We still have this virus out there. You talked about trying to get the economy going, not only here in the United States, but around the world. We need answers to these questions. We need transparency, and we need the World Health Organization to do its job, to perform its primary function, which is to make sure that the world has accurate, timely, effective, real information about what's going on in the global health space. And they didn't get that done here.
So shouldn't accountability matter? We keep being told that lives are at stake. Jennifer Rubin, who I don't even know how many of you know her, she writes the Washington Post. She's a, quote, conservative. She's the most left-wing conservative I've ever seen in my life. She really does. It's remarkable. There are people who their careers are built on saying that they share ideals and ideas with you and me, and then every day they just trash those ideas and ideals and everybody on our side for the amusement of the other side. And I can't imagine anything in the media that's more intellectually debasing than that. I know they're paying her probably very well to write those columns. I know that Joe Scarborough gets paid millions of dollars to do the same thing at MSNBC. But I just feel like it would be, for a person of any conscience and any pride, it would be an issue. But no, greed for most people completely overrides conscience and pride and dignity. They just, whatever they can, they want to be important and they want to make money, and nothing else really matters. she says that she's been tweeting out how Trump is killing people. That's her. They're just saying, forget the blood on his hands is a little bit too metaphorical for them. So they're just saying Trump is killing people now. That's what they've gone to. That he's effectively making decisions that are actively murdering people as a result of this COVID-19. He's like the mafia don that's giving the orders. So he might as well have pulled the trigger himself, so to speak. That's where we are now with the left. But if that's the language they're going to use, I just want to know, what about Dr. Tedros, the World Health Organization? What would it have meant if they had said, no, China, hold on a second. We need samples here. We need more information. We need more transparency. And they were able to ring the alarm for the whole world. Guys, this is really contagious and more dangerous than you realize, and they're not going to be able to contain it in China. How much pain and misery and economic devastation could that have saved us from? But no accountability, we are told. No accountability for the World Health Organization is allowed. Remember, this is pending a review. Maybe the review shows, I doubt it, but maybe the review shows that they did the best they could under the circumstances, and U.S. funding for this continues. Also note that we're giving them hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and we turn around and find out that we don't have enough masks and ventilators for frontline medical providers. Hundreds of millions of dollars buys a lot of masks, buys a lot of ventilators, buys a lot of necessary, there are a whole lot of drugs. Things when you get into the details of the procedures that we're using right now that are trying to keep people alive, dealing with the heart complications of COVID-19 for ICU patients, dealing with the pain, giving people morphine, all these different components. And you realize that materiel and supply matters in this fight. We're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the World Health Organization. Maybe that money should come from somebody else. I'm not saying we shouldn't give them any money, but, are we allowed to evaluate these priorities? China has 1 billion people, and we're giving 10 times the money that China's giving. Does that seem fair? Well, China has a lot more. China got to essentially pick the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros. Big push for that. And we all see what that has meant in terms of the way that they were willing to be accomplice to the Chinese fraud in the early days of covering up this virus, what was going on. And we are all still, you and I are paying the price for this right now. Your freedom, your livelihood, your safety, your future, and your families are all damaged right now because of what China did and what the World Health Organization helped them do. I do believe that there should be some degree of accountability for that. I do believe that's not something that we should just forgive and forget. Will they ever change? Will they get better at the WHO? Well, here's what Trump says. Play 13.
We will continue to engage with the WHO to see if it can make meaningful reforms. For the time being, we will redirect global health and directly work with others. All of the aid that we send will be discussed at very, very powerful letters and with very powerful and influential groups and smart groups, medically, politically, and every other way. And we'll be discussing it with other countries and global health partners, what we do with all of that money that goes to WHO. And maybe WHO will reform, and maybe they won't.
We'll see.
This should not stop you from going about your life, should not stop you from going to Chinatown and going out to eat. I'm going to do that today myself.
Come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
There is no concern at this time for coronavirus in our region.
The Department of Sanitation is ready for Mardi Gras 2020.
The facts are reassuring.
We want New Yorkers to go about their daily lives.
There's really no need to panic and to avoid activities that we always do as New Yorkers. We are a hardy people.
Americans do not need to panic. What I would suggest, however, is that Americans take this as a wake-up call for seasonal flu.
There's very little threat here. This disease, even if you were to get it, basically acts like a common cold or flu.
there you had leaders from the cities that are the worst hit by this so far. Some of the cities the worst hit by this. San Francisco not as badly, certainly, as New Orleans or New York, but telling us that there's no problem. Go out, go to the Chinese Lunar New Year festival in your town. Go to the place where you were at that point in time, perhaps most susceptible to come into contact with travelers from China who were vectors for the spread of this disease all over the world. That was what you were being told. And I've got to tell you, some of those same people, I mean, Pelosi has this video that's circulating right now, and it's of her on who's the like British. He's like, I got like a high voice up here, and I'm a British comedian. Who's that guy? You know what I'm talking about?
Ricky Gervais.
No, Ricky Gervais is awesome. This is a guy who's like, I've got a late night talk show, and I'm like,
John Oliver.
I look like I've had a lot of peanut M&Ms. No, not John Oliver. He's a different guy.
James Corden.
Yes, James Corden. Pelosi went on the James Corden show, and she's doing this whole like, well, here we are in lockdown, and, look at all the ice cream we have. And she's showing everybody she's got quite an ice cream selection. Now, part of me is jealous, but I just think it's funny because Pelosi's one of these listen to the experts, lockdown forever, national lockdown people. She lives in a multi-million-dollar, I want to say it's like a $10, maybe $15 million house in the San Francisco Bay Area. She lives in a mansion, a straight-up mansion. And she's doing this video that for those of us who know anything about home appliances, I'm somebody who spends a fair amount of time in the kitchen. She's in front of what look to be two Viking refrigerators. She's standing in front of, I want to say, $50,000, $60,000 of just appliances in her home. She's got the fanciest stuff you can imagine. Double Viking refrigerators, which for those that know, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in a kitchen pretty easily if you want to. I know that's crazy, but believe it or not, that's a thing that can happen pretty easily. If you're a rich person and you want to do that. So this is like the equivalent of Nancy Pelosi, driving around in a Rolls Royce and flipping open the top of her Haagen-Dazs saying, oh, look at how delicious the ice cream is. I'm being so good during my social distancing. And it's just the most let them eat cake moment. I see this stuff and I'm really reminded of why in other eras and at other times, the peasants just get tired of it, show up in the town square with pitchforks and torches and say, we're coming to pay a visit to the elites. This stuff that we see going on here for the, I can work at home, I've got savings, everything's fine for me. One thing that is happening is, the media industry is in the process of getting completely crushed because there's very little sales going on, and sales for advertising are necessary. So the media is going to start to really feel this in the next 30 to 60 days. But Pelosi wants you to know that, she's got lots of ice cream in her $40,000 refrigerators. All right, everybody, for your listening enjoyment, we've got our friend Sean Davis back in the mix. He is co-founder of The Federalist, and his Twitter game is fierce, owning and triggering libs like it's going out of style to this day. We have Sean Davis with us now. Mr. Davis, thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this, man. So the big debate in the country right now, as we all know, is when to reopen and what Trump's overall approach is to getting the economy going. What are you seeing from your side as to what the media treatment of this is versus what the reality of the country and it's going through right now?
Yes, well, I think that's a really difficult question because I don't think everyone is going through the same thing at the same time. As we've seen in this pandemic, it seems to be pretty localized or regionalized. Some places haven't had any issue with it. Other places like New York City have had huge problems with it. And so I think the first thing to establish is it really hasn't been a national pandemic, at least not yet. And so you can't have a national solution either to the spread of the pandemic or the reopening of the economy. I think this all has to be done kind of piecemeal, different places, different measures at different times. And instead, what you're seeing, at least from the media, is if you talk about allowing people to go back to work and provide for their families at any point, what you're actually saying is you want everyone to die.
Right. Well, I've come up against this. I'm sure you have too. And I always feel like, one, there are decisions made all the time. I mean, people drive to work. We could tell everyone no more driving. And everyone dismisses this, but I think it establishes a real principle that we need to keep in mind, which is if we told people no more driving to work or just no more driving, period, it would save 30 to 40,000 lives every year. If we forced everyone into public transportation or told, if you weren't allowed to drive your own car, people would just say, no, not going to do that. The same thing would be true of the flu. And in a year, 40 to 60,000 people, depends on the year, but roughly 40 to 60,000 people die. We could shut the economy down for even just a couple of months to bring that curve way down. We don't. There are decisions made that have risks. Risk mitigation is part of day-to-day life. But it sounds like Fauci and I keep calling it the moving consensus, or maybe we should call it the lockdown consensus. The lockdown consensus seems to be that we should just do this for as long as we have to until we get to 0 new cases. Sean, that means we're going to be doing this for at least another year or so. At least.
Well, yeah, that's a call for national suicide, and it's not credible. It's absurd. And I actually think your driving example is a good one. You'll have people mow it and say, oh, you can't say that. This is a pandemic. This isn't like driving. But no, the principle is that we accept as a society trade-offs and risks in everything we do. So if you don't want to go shut down all the roads and all the highways, it means you want to die. You want people to die in cars. You have no problem with people dying in cars. That's the argument that we're given by the lockdowners. And that's just not an argument that adults make. So you could eliminate driving deaths, just close down the roads. Stop selling any sort of high-fat food, stop red meat, bacon, anything that contributes to heart disease, which is one of the biggest killers in America each year. Skin cancer, huge threat. The older you get, the more likely you're going to have it. So we should probably just stop letting people go outside. So right there, we've gotten rid of car deaths, skin cancer deaths, or at least new ones or new cases, heart disease. And of course, you would hear that example of shutting all those things down and say that's absurd, and that's because it is. So the question to me isn't should we reopen the economy? Of course we should. The question is, what is the best way to do it, kind of in a staged scenario? How do you regionalize it? What do you open up first? What restrictions do you keep in place? Those are the discussions we should be having. But instead, what the media is saying is if you want to discuss it at all, you hate your grandmother and you want everyone to die. And unfortunately, I don't know why I'm still here expecting like an adult discussion or reasonable treatment from the media. But I am, somehow I woke up this morning thinking they'd be reasonable. And yet again, they're making me
one of my theories, Sean, on this has been that if you were concocting a wargaming scenario to see if it would be possible for the national news media in general. There are always exceptions, and I like to say that because I've got friends who are journalists who do real work and do a good job. There are very, very few of them, though, as a percentage. But if you were trying to come up with a scenario where you would hope that the mainstream media would put aside the petty nonsense and do the jobs that they claim that they do, this would be it. And what we see in those press conferences with Trump day in and day out is honestly appalling.
It's horrific. And I mean, just go back 2 months. When this thing first started popping up in January, CNN attacked Trump because his pandemic response task force wasn't diverse enough, just to show you how serious they were. And then when he shut down travel from China, which was one of the biggest vectors for this disease, and people coming in from China was how it spread here, they said, oh, he's racist. And then a week after that, they said, you know what? Don't listen to Trump. You should go out and party in New York City on the Chinese.
Oh, we just played that audio before you came on, by the way. So everyone's familiar with that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, and oh, no, stop wearing masks, you idiot. You're a moron if you go and wear a mask. That wasn't an eon ago. That wasn't like a different generation. That was 2 months ago. So when you have those people saying those same things in the same networks who said those now saying that, oh, Trump didn't do enough and we have to lock down the economy, these are not credible people. They're not reasonable. They're not serious. In a normal, well-functioning, well-adjusted society, we would dismiss those people as cranks and nut jobs. And yet here we are basically hostage to whatever they want to talk about every day. It's really disheartening.
We're speaking to Sean Davis, co-founder of The Federalist, thefederalist.com, as you all know, one of my favorite sites for commentary. Sean, the China situation here. There was a piece, and I should probably, I'll come back and read from it so everyone can hear it later on. There was a piece where CNN ran as a news item that I think it was the Chinese, the People's Navy of China, or whatever it is they call the Navy there, the People's Republic of China Navy, was doing a better job controlling coronavirus than we were. And it comes from a straight up state media site of China. And you wonder, at what point do people feel like our own media is grotesque in its propagation of these Chinese state narratives? But I suppose that then also gets wrapped into, as long as it is useful in some purpose for bashing Trump, the CNN audience doesn't mind.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know the story I'm talking about, by the way? It's pretty remarkable.
Yes, it was the PLA Navy, like the People's Liberation Army Navy or something like that. Yeah, they took it directly from a Chinese news site. We've seen the same thing from NBC, which is owned by Comcast. And I keep wondering every time they go out and parrot Chinese propaganda, what exactly is Comcast trying to do in China? And I'll tell you, when Trump a couple years ago started his fake news as the enemy of the people rhetoric, at the time, I'm all for media bashing. I've got no problem with it because they're eminently bashable. But the enemy of the people thing kind of made me uncomfortable. And I'll tell you what, having watched their behavior through this and watched them flack for China and peddle communist Chinese propaganda, watched them run interference for the China communist-controlled World Health Organization, I'm coming around to the enemy of the people moniker.
Yeah, I'd been saying the enemy of truth. That's sort of a modification to Trump's line. But I agree with you that right now, if you don't feel a surge of anger again, and I always say this, it's against the Chinese ruling class and Chinese Communist Party and military. It's not against the people of China. But if you don't feel a surge of anger against those institutions and that communist thugocracy, what the heck is going on with you? I mean, we're at a point now where the country is in greater jeopardy than it has been in the post-World War II era. I think that's a fair way to look at this. And yet there's not a surge of patriotism certainly from our press. It seems like there are a lot of people that have the partisan impulse up to and including helping the Chinese narrative at a point when Chinese-U.S. relations are deteriorating more rapidly than ever, and I think as they should. What do you make of the suspension of money pending investigation of the W.H.O? We were just talking about that.
I'm fine with it, accepting the pending investigation. Cut them off. They were peddling nonsense. They were peddling stuff they knew wasn't true. That there was no human-to-human transmission. Their lies and China's lies, in addition to whatever China did to allow this thing to get let loose, is absolutely unconscionable. We have a world now being held hostage, both medically and economically, by either the malevolence or the incompetence of China and their little puppet control regime at the World Health Organization. I say defund them entirely. And by the way, don't stop there. All the money that we owe China, I think they own something like $1 trillion of our debt. Yeah, that's gone. That should never be paid back by a dime of American money ever again because of the damage that those corrupt commies caused through their coronavirus.
We're going to continue with Sean Davis. You're talking about some of the domestic issues that are rising up as we're in national lockdown here. Stay with us. All right, everyone, we're talking to Sean Davis, co-founder of The Federalist. He writes there. Also, if you happen to be on Twitter and you want to see somebody crush libs with reckless abandon, follow Sean Davis on Twitter. Sean, I had been led to believe, I'm not going to say I'd thought, I had been led to believe that we were the land of the free, the home of the brave. Give me liberty or give me death. Don't tread on me. These are all things that I had internalized over many years of life and felt that I had seen in action with our military abroad, for example, and the American spirit at its best. But now we're facing this pandemic, and all of a sudden it's land of the free, home of the brave, unless somebody waves a doctor's note in our faces and says, you all have to stay home until we say you can leave your house. You can't go to church. You can't see friends. You can't go to other houses that you own. I got a problem with that. What do you think of all this?
Yeah, it's been kind of disconcerting. Now, I'll say from the outset, the American people were generally free, we're independent-minded, we're also pretty compassionate. We care about our neighbors, we care about our family. And I think what you've seen in a lot of this is that in various areas is government officials taking advantage of the good faith efforts and the charity and compassion of their citizens. And I think one reason you've seen the social distancing work well isn't because of government, it's because of people's desire to take care of their families and their neighbors. Now, with that said, there's a limit to it, and I think we're getting pretty close to it. In Kentucky, you had the governor sending the state police after people who were going to drive-in church. So, now, they could go to a drive-in liquor store, and they could go walk around a grocery store, but they couldn't sit in their cars and go to church. In Raleigh, North Carolina, you had protests there, and you had the police actually come out and say, quote, protesting is not an essential activity, as if somehow the Constitution had been suspended. And then now you have in Michigan, where you have this incompetent governor up there banning the sale of things like seeds and infant car seats, saying those are non-essential. There's going to come a point, I think, sooner rather than later, that the patience of the American people with this is going to be completely run out, and we're going to start having issues. And in fact, in Lansing, Michigan today, you're having significant protests by people in their cars driving around the Capitol to the tune of thousands of them. People's patience is running out soon, and their willingness to be subjugated by tyrannical government officials, I think, is going to run out.
Well, that's exactly that's what I'm trying to get at here. I mean, I understand, and I'm here in New York, where we've just been annihilated by this thing right now. I mean, we are in such bad shape as a city because of this, and I've got friends who are nurses and doctors who are trying to do their best to keep people alive and try to push through all of this, and it's a very bad scene. We understand all that, but I'm just in certain areas. I think it's what bothers me isn't that there's this, isn't when people are anyone acting in good faith based on government instruction to try to keep people safe and alive. I get that. But when the government does overreach, and we all see it, and then people say, well, hold on a second, that's really not necessary. The lockdown chorus sometimes jumps in and says, why are you all so stupid? Why do you need to go to a drive-in church? That's the part of this that I think starts to really unsettle me, as if like there really are people that seem to think that a, quote, benevolent authoritarianism from the U.S. government or from state governments really is actually what's been doing this from state governments would be a good thing. That's disconcerting.
Yeah, and it's interesting from the lockdown crowd. I've noticed that all of them still have their jobs, which puts them in a very unique bubble for them. And I would suggest that they need to talk to more people and expose themselves to some more news sources. Because while if you are a journalist who can sit at home in his or her pajamas and still get paid and work on his computer, you don't have kids to homeschool, you generally had all your food delivered to you anyway because you're a social hermit, those folks need to consider for a moment that maybe not the rest of America is having the same experience. Maybe the rest of America isn't sitting around and Netflixing and chilling during this quarantine. Maybe they're worried about whether they can afford food for their families, where they're going to find another job, if they're ever going to be let out of their homes to earn a paycheck and a livelihood to provide for themselves and their families. And I think far too few people in media are thinking through the consequences of a situation where 10, 20, 30 million people have been forcibly put out of work, have been locked in their homes, and then with a cherry on top, they have been banned from worshiping as required by their doctrines and their religious rules. It is really unconscionable how little empathy and sympathy we're seeing from anyone in the national media about what people are going through when they've lost their jobs, when they've lost their freedom, and they can't even worship.
And I'm just wondering why is it not more apparent what the projections would be? I think people, because there are those who believe that we should just be on lockdown until September, for example. The IHME models go until August. Why don't we all know? And we only got about a minute, Sean, but I just want your take here on why do we not know what the economy is supposed to look like if we keep doing this for 3 more months? I think we should know.
Oh, I think there's a lot of a willful ignorance going on from the media. Now, first off, let's not pretend the epidemiologists cranking out these garbage models have any clue what's going to happen with this pandemic. They actually don't. Their models have proven it. The economic modeling is actually a lot easier. It's kind of like modeling what happens to your sprinklers when you turn the water off. Turns out there's no water, and after a while, your grass is going to die. And an economy is no different.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. That they're really able to model. They know what the trajectory is. It's just a case where they have to try to guess what it is. Sean, we know you're out there in a red state. We want to hear how things are going. So come back and tell us what you're hearing from the folks in your AO, because here in New York City, it's easy to get a very specific view of things. But Sean Davis of The Federalist, everybody, check out thefederalist.com. Sean, thanks so much for your time. You stay safe. Take care of yours.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Buck.